For over 2,000 years, billions have placed their faith in sacred scriptures, words believed to be a direct message from the divine. But what if I told you that what we read today isn't exactly what was originally written? This isn't some wild theory or conspiracy. It's the outcome of decades of rigorous research by top scholars in ancient languages and biblical studies. A single mistranslated word can dramatically alter the meaning of an entire sentence, and one misunderstood sentence can reshape a doctrine. A distorted doctrine, in turn, has the potential to redefine the faith of millions. In this video, we'll explore 3 of the most startling revelations about Bible translations. The term hell, a concept that has haunted humanity for 2 millennia, might have been misinterpreted from its original meaning. One of Christianity's core beliefs could be founded on a misunderstanding of ancient Hebrew. Additionally, our perception of God's nature might have been influenced by political decisions made during the Middle Ages. But before we dive into these findings, it's important to grasp the complex process of translating the Bible, a journey spanning 2,000 years, various languages, and numerous political and cultural pressures. Many people believe the Bible was directly translated from its original text into modern English, but the truth is far more complex. Every translation is shaped by the period it was written in, influenced by those in power, and occasionally by personal biases. When scholars began comparing ancient manuscripts with modern translations, they uncovered shocking inconsistencies, discrepancies not just in minor phrasing, but in translations that could radically transform our understanding of faith. Over the next few minutes, we'll look at 3 significant mistranslations, investigate the motivations behind them, and most importantly, reveal the true meaning of these passages in their original context. After watching this, you might never look at the Bible the same way again. Because while the truth can be unsettling, it's always worth seeking. The bigger question we must confront is, do we really understand God's message, or are we simply believing what others have shaped it to be? The Bible is not a single book. It's a collection of writings spanning over 1,000 years, penned by various authors across different historical contexts. The Old Testament, the oldest section of the Bible, was primarily written in Hebrew, with some parts in Aramaic, a language spoken widely in ancient Mesopotamia. These texts, composed between approximately 1200 and 165 BCE, document the history, laws, and prophecies of ancient Israel. Every letter in ancient Hebrew carries deep, multi-layered meanings. A single word can hold several interpretations depending on context. The New Testament, written during the 1st century CE, was composed in Koine Greek, the common trade language of that era. This was the language of philosophy, literature, and commerce throughout the ancient Mediterranean. But translating these intricate meanings into other languages posed a monumental challenge. In the 4th century, St. Jerome took on the task of translating the entire Bible into Latin, a project that spanned 23 years. His translation, known as the Vulgate, became the standard text of the Roman Catholic Church for over a millennium. Yet even Jerome himself admitted the challenges of translation, saying that translating word for word could render the text unintelligible, while altering the structure could betray its original meaning. In 325 CE, the Council of Nicaea convened to unify doctrine. Their decisions not only shaped biblical interpretation but influenced future translations. As the Bible was translated into English, each version reflected the era in which it was created. Tyndale's translation in 1526 cost him his life, and the King James Version, completed in 1611, was crafted to reinforce royal authority. Take one specific example. The Hebrew word yul could mean either palace or temple. When translated into Latin, it became templum, and in English, simply temple, losing part of its original nuance. If a simple word can lose so much meaning, what has happened to more complex concepts such as sin, salvation, or heaven? Today, there are hundreds of Bible translations, each attempting to balance faithfulness to the original texts with clarity for modern readers. But is this enough? Behind these shifts in language lies a much larger narrative, one of power, control, and, in some cases deliberate alterations. And this is what we will explore further, tracing the history of Bible translations and questioning whether these decisions were always made to preserve the original message. By the 4th century, the Roman Empire was undergoing significant transformations. Emperor Constantine had declared Christianity the official state religion. A unified faith, however, required a unified message. For emperors and church leaders, the Bible became a tool not only to spread faith but also to consolidate power. Bible translations often reflected the interests of those in authority. For instance, the King James Version was not just a translation but a political statement, crafted to emphasize royal power and social hierarchy in line with the monarchy's agenda. Yet political influence was not the only challenge. Language itself posed significant barriers. Ancient Hebrew, with its unique grammar and rich metaphors, often lacked direct equivalents in Latin or modern languages. Take the Hebrew word chesed, for example. It encapsulates love, loyalty, and kindness, but no single word in another language fully conveys its depth. Cultural differences also added complexity. How do you explain the concept of heaven to cultures without an afterlife tradition? Or the idea of sin to societies with different moral frameworks? Religious institutions played their role too, with each denomination seeking translations that aligned with its specific doctrines. Small changes in wording could lead to substantial shifts in the understanding of a doctrine. These changes, once accepted, were often repeated in subsequent translations. Every Bible translation we read today is the product of a web of influences, political power, language limitations, cultural differences, and religious pressures. The critical question is, how have these factors altered the original message? In the next section, we'll examine 3 specific passages that have been significantly distorted over the centuries, challenging everything we thought we knew about modern Bible translations. For instance, whenever we encounter the term hell in the Bible, we read it as such. But this could be one of the most consequential translation errors in religious history. In the original Hebrew, the word used is Gehenna, not an abstract concept of hell, but a real location. The Valley of Hinnom, located just south of ancient Jerusalem. This valley holds a particularly dark history. In the Old Testament, history records that Gehenna was once a site of child sacrifices to the Canaanite god Molech. King Josiah of Judah ended this gruesome practice by converting the valley into a garbage dump for the city, where waste was continually burned, creating an ongoing scene of fire and smoke. When Jesus referred to Gehenna in his teachings, the Jews of his time immediately understood it as a vivid, tangible symbol of destruction and purification, something they could see daily from Jerusalem. However, problems arose when the Bible was translated into Greek and Latin. Gehenna became infernum in the Latin Vulgate, a term that evoked images of the underworld in Greco-Roman mythology. When rendered into English, it became hell, a concept heavily influenced by Norse mythologies, Helheim, the realm of the dead. This mistranslation, combined with medieval literature and art, most notably Dante's Divine Comedy, contributed to the creation of a new image of hell, now depicted as a place of eternal torment filled with fire, demons, and unending punishment. This transformation led to several key distortions. First, it altered the meaning of Gehenna. What was once a physical symbol of purification became an abstract idea of eternal damnation. Second, it became a tool of control, as the image of hell was used to instill fear and reinforce the authority of the medieval church. Lastly, the theological shift occurred. The original message of repentance and purification was replaced by a doctrine of eternal condemnation. Today, the Valley of Hinnom in Jerusalem is a peaceful park, but the legacy of this mistranslation continues to shape our understanding of sin, salvation, and the nature of God. Did Jesus, in using the image of a burning trash heap to illustrate purification, ever imagine it would evolve into a doctrine of eternal torture? This is just one example of how a single mistranslation can reshape our perception of faith in God. Another prominent example is found in Isaiah 7 verse 14, a prophecy that has become foundational for the doctrine of the virgin birth of Jesus. But is this what the original text intended? In the original Hebrew, the word used is alma, which Hebrew scholars note simply means a young woman or maiden of marriageable age. It does not necessarily imply virginity. In fact, the word appears 7 times in the Old Testament, and in most instances it is translated as young woman. If the authors had intended to emphasize virginity specifically, they would likely have used the word betula, which explicitly means virgin. The significant shift occurred when the Bible was translated into Greek in the Septuagint. As Christianity spread, this mistranslation became the basis for the doctrine of the virgin birth of Jesus. The Latin Vulgate continued the tradition by using the word virgo, and subsequent English translations followed suit with virgin. In its original context, the prophecy likely referred to a specific event during the reign of King Ahaz in the 8th century BCE, where the young woman was likely a known individual, and the birth of her child was meant to be a sign for that particular historical period. This mistranslation has had profound implications. It created an expectation of a miraculous virgin birth in the New Testament and contributed to the doctrine of the perpetual virginity of Mary. It has influenced Christian views on sexuality and purity over centuries. The image of the Virgin Mary became a powerful symbol in Christian art and culture. However, modern scholars question whether we have imposed a meaning on the original text that was never intended. This doesn't necessarily diminish the Christian faith in the birth of Jesus, but it highlights how translations can evolve and shape doctrines over time. It raises the question: should we reevaluate how we interpret sacred texts in light of their historical and linguistic origins? The mistranslation of Alma is an example of how a single word can deeply influence doctrine and belief. Another example, perhaps even more controversial, lies in the concept of the image of God. From the very first chapters of the Bible, this phrase has shaped humanity's understanding of itself and its relationship with the Creator. In Hebrew, the phrase is Tselem Elohim, commonly translated as in the image of God. However, in the context of the ancient Near East, the term had a richer, more complex meaning. In ancient civilizations like Egypt and Babylon, being in the image of the gods was a concept reserved for kings, who were considered exclusive representatives of divine authority on earth. This justified their absolute rule. Therefore, when the Genesis text declared that all humanity was created in the image of God, it was a revolutionary statement, asserting that every human being bore the divine imprint. As the phrase was translated into Greek, Latin, and later European languages, its revolutionary meaning diminished. Within the hierarchical societies of medieval Europe, it was interpreted in ways that reinforced existing power structures. The church and nobility often used this phrase to justify their privileged positions, arguing that some people reflected the image of God more clearly than others, thus providing a theological basis for social and religious hierarchies. The consequences of this misinterpretation were significant. It was used to justify monarchic rule, claiming the divine right of kings, and it strengthened the church's power by positioning it as the sole interpreter of God's will. Most troubling, it created a social hierarchy in which some were seen as closer to God than others, perpetuating inequality for centuries. It wasn't until the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment that the original egalitarian message of Tselem Elohim began to resurface. Reformers emphasized that all individuals could have direct access to God, challenging the monopoly of the church and monarchy on divine representation. Perhaps it is time to revisit the original meaning of Tselem Elohim, not as a tool to establish power but as a bold affirmation of the equality and dignity of all people. These 3 examples, Gehenna, Alma, and Tselem Elohim, illustrate how translations and interpretations can profoundly alter not only the meaning of texts, but also the very structure of society and religion. By exploring these historical and linguistic shifts, we unlock a deeper, more authentic understanding of faith, one that reconnects us with the transformative power of the original message. To truly grasp an ancient text, we cannot merely read the words. We must immerse ourselves in the context in which those words were written. Take Gehenna, for example. To a first-century Jew, this term did not evoke an abstract notion of hell. It referred to a real valley, filled with smoke from burning refuse, serving as a vivid symbol of purification and destruction. Cultural context is equally crucial. When Hebrew authors used the word Alma, it reflected a term from their everyday language, rich with cultural and social connotations that cannot be fully captured in a simple translation. The Bible was written in a world vastly different from our own, a world of ancient empires, long-lost cultures, and cosmologies that differed fundamentally from modern perspectives. When we read about being made in the image of God, we must recognize that in the ancient world, this idea carried significant political and social implications, directly challenging the power structures of empires, where only kings were seen as embodying the divine image. Over time, translation has gradually stripped away many of these layers of meaning. Every translation attempts to convey the text's essence to a new audience, but in doing so, many nuances are inevitably lost. These shifts in understanding are not merely academic concerns. They have profoundly shaped how millions perceive God and practice their faith. Consider the narrative of hell. The idea of eternal torment became a powerful tool of control, forming the basis for doctrines of everlasting punishment. However, this strayed far from the original message of purification and transformation. Another example is the emphasis on Mary's virginity, which has not only shaped theology but also Christian views on women and sexuality. This focus may have created moral expectations that diverge from the original intent of the text. Similarly, misinterpretations of the phrase image of God have reinforced social and religious hierarchies, justifying dominance over others, a perspective that runs counter to the original egalitarian message. What can we do with these new insights? First, we must recognize that interpreting the Bible accurately requires more than simply reading modern translations. Thanks to advancements in technology and research, we now have unprecedented access to the original meanings of these ancient texts. We can learn from scholars, utilize research tools, and explore historical contexts in greater depth than ever before. Most importantly, we should remember this. Seeking truth does not weaken faith, it strengthens it. When we uncover the original messages, we rediscover their depth and revolutionary potential. Perhaps it's time to ask, if we could return to the original meanings of these sacred texts, could that not transform not only how we understand faith but also how we live it? This journey to uncover the truth about Bible translations has revealed remarkable insights. It's not just a story about language, it's about how humanity understands God, faith, and itself. We've seen how the real valley of Gehenna transformed into an abstract concept of eternal hell. We've witnessed how Alma, a term meaning young woman, became the foundation for one of Christianity's most significant doctrines. And we've understood how image of God was misinterpreted to uphold power structures rather than to declare equality. The most important lesson we've learned is the significance of context. Every word in the Bible was written in a specific time and for a specific audience, carrying distinct cultural and social meanings. When we overlook this context, we don't just lose meaning, we risk creating entirely new ones. So, what do we do with these revelations? We must have the courage to ask questions, the courage to acknowledge that what we believe may not align with what was originally written, and the courage to seek truth even when it challenges long-held beliefs. There are many ways to begin this journey: exploring the Dead Sea Scrolls, studying the Septuagint, learning about the history and culture of the ancient world, or engaging in discussions about the Bible's original meanings. But most importantly, we should share these discoveries and create spaces for open, honest conversations about faith. After all, truth is not a threat to faith. It is the foundation for a stronger, more authentic belief system. 2,000 years is a long time for truths to remain hidden, but it's never too late to unearth them. In the end, the question is not whether we dare confront the truth, but whether we dare to live with a faith rooted in that truth.